hi everybody. So yeah, today's a bit maybe unusual subject is to talk about sustainability and planning analytics. So just a short presentation to set up the stage and to understand what kind of business we can have with planning analytics around sustainability. So you can start from the United Nations. Okay, they have set up 12 goals. Okay, on the one we are seeing now, different nature. It can be for no poverty, zero hunger, or climate action, sustainable cities, and so on. So maybe you can think what no poverty or zero hunger what to do with companies. Well, actually, it does, because a lot of companies actually report the amount of their net income, for instance, they assign to some no poverty actions or NGO or any kind of initiative around that. So it can be around education or water quality. For sure, everybody is impacted by climate action. That's got a lot to do with CO2. To understand it, if in some countries, at least for Spain, for instance, going to be mandatory to report around sustainability. Any companies of more than 40 million of turnover will have to report about that. So there is a legal obligation, not only for companies, but for companies, but also for any public entity. And the idea was to solve some main pain points. So as you can understand, sustainability, when you've seen all the 17 goals we've seen for the United Nations, basically it's a bunch of or aggregation or groups of indicators for a specific subject. And we are talking about hundreds of indicators. So as you can imagine, there are many kind of format, data source. So that's the main problems to get all these different kind of information. You can imagine also a pain point around data aggregation. We're going to have different indicators with different dimensions and available in different details that we will have to manipulate, to aggregate, and so on. A problem also around traceability and audit. Okay, so to know where it comes from, when it has been validated, and so on. Also, there is an issue around reporting. The United Nations framework is one of many other frameworks. In Europe, we've got also, well, maybe not only in Europe, but in many parts of the world, there is also another famous framework called General Reporting Initiative. And every time a new framework will arrive, or if you go, for instance, for BlackRock, they will have their own specific framework for you to report around sustainability. So the idea is to solve these problems, to build on top of planning analytics, kind of, I will call it a meta model, or I call it accelerator, because you need to understand that every sector, every company will have to report a specific indicator following some guidelines. So what we use, a lot of out-of-the-box capacity of planning analytics, first around data collection. So we can use to collect based on file data entry, manual data entry, connected to data sources, because maybe you can have, let's say, indicators around gender equality that we might find in your human resources database, so you can get, or maybe it can be a CO2 production report given by your auditor, and maybe send you PDFs that you might have to input manually. So the capacity to integrate with Excel and with an API for any other, of course, application. So the idea is to be able to collect any kind of information, to put them in a predefined model, and the idea is to gives the possibility to configure this model to put your own indicators and the dimension for each indicator. You're going to understand that each indicator will have its own dimensionality, and even this dimensionality might change over the time according to the maturity of the organization. Maybe today I want to report my CO2 production total company, but maybe tomorrow it has to be on by subsidiary, by region, by product, or any kind of other dimension. So we need this flexibility to adapt the model easily. And the idea is that it could be configured by an end user or a junior consultant. Okay, so we will have the data management, data collection, then also the possibility to create, also very important, to create actions around each of these indicators, because you can understand that if we take CO2, my CO2 production, the idea is to improve or to reduce, let's say, my CO2 production. So for that, I'm gonna put in place a series of actions, initiatives that will impact my my indicator. So that's what the idea is, also to manage this kind of actions. And then, of course, the visualization. And of course, we'll have to implement some custom workflow because might have different responsible for each of these indicators, security, and so on. No-code platform, basically, it's what we sell with planning analytics since the beginning. Okay, that's the terminology is being quite commonly used lately. So that's why it's important to use this word. No? So to use planning analytics, to present it as a low-code, no-code platform to implement indicators and action management around sustainability. And the main ingredients or out-of-the-box capability, it is the engine, the data engine, the fact that we can easily modelize any kind of data model to collect the information from these indicators. Integration layer, the application layer, the fact that we can build based on drag and drop web application, the analytical layer, and the fact that we can design any kind of ad hoc workflow for any kind of need we can have around sustainability. The benefits, what will be the cost, because this model doesn't have any cost, can be distributed for free. Is prepared to manage sustainability information. And of course, the idea is to sell, to be able to grow as much as you want, because sooner or later you will have to import financial data to cross it with sustainability data to get some ratio and so on. You might need to build some complex calculation or simulation. So as I said, we have different framework. Here we started with the United Nations framework, the SDG, because it's it's nice, it's colorful, it's quite complete. But basically, understand that any reporting framework, it's nothing else than a group of different groups of indicators. So when you click on this, it brings you to some dashboard. Okay. Actually, the value of it is not the dashboard by itself, but how we configure the data model. As you can imagine, each indicator, each group of indicator will have their own dimensions. And as I said, it might even evolve along the time. So here, for instance, climate action is basically around emissions, gas emissions and CO2. So we might want to analyze the CO2 by our organization or region or even product if we want. By asset type, okay, by I don't know, my data center, my vehicles, office, building, whatever, or by gas type, for instance, okay, and then we can then navigate by the time dimension. So the value here is being able to define all this model, as I said, from a point of view from an end user or a junior consultant. Now here I have two things. First, the definition of the model, and then the data collection. So if I go to the definition of the model, here to give the possibility to create your indicator. Okay, to understand what is behind the scene, it's quite simple. For each one of these 17 goals, I've got a cube, and they all follow the same logic. There is an indicator dimension that's specific for the goal cube. Got an entity dimension. It's a shared dimension. This one is a shared dimension. I've got a time dimension by year, quarter, and month. A version dimension where we're going to store our actual data and our targets. And then what I did is pre-created 3 custom dimensions. There are this one again specific to the cube. So the idea to set up the data structure to get our indicator is we create the indicator. We're going to manage our entity dimension. As I said, can be by subsidiary, by business unit or region, whatever. And then we're going to specify our optional custom dimension. So if I'm talking about CO2, it's very likely that I might want to report the CO2 by asset type. Okay, so then I will define this dimension. If it doesn't apply to this dimension, I will use my custom one and non-applicable element. The same for other custom dimension. In this case, the second one is used for gas type. And my third dimension, in this case, I'm not using it. So all the data will go to my non-applicable element. And then I will have the possibility to rename and give a business name to my custom dimension. Something I forgot also here, for my indicator, I will be able to manage multi-language, the units. And something important is the possibility to map to other reporting framework. Basically, a lot of the indicators will be common on different reporting framework. So what I do, I just have to map it, so I don't have to manage it and duplicate the management of this indicator. So this will be for the indicator or data model management. Then we have the data collection. So once we have created our indicator, we will generate a view or a screen for each of our indicator. And then we're gonna set up a view where we will include all the corresponding dimension. Okay, so in this case, I want to use the indicator CO2 emissions. I want to report by asset type, entity, maybe at a yearly level. Okay, and then I'm gonna set up, I can do data entry on my actual value. I can define my targets and understand that because all of that is likely to be audited, here I embedded a box window where I can drag and drop my evidences. Okay, because that is going to be the first thing the auditor will ask to justify my number. Okay, so here I get then the URL and I passed it in my comments so I can access the evidence directly. Then I can also manage all the approval. I can do it in this case at detail level or at a global level, a global indicator. Regarding data collection, here of course I was talking about data entry, manual data entry, and then we can of course talk about data integration with databases. Might be useful, for instance, as I said, if we are talking about gender equality, and get data directly from our human resources database. Or I could drag and drop a file, for instance, to also to load data or use API. So this is for data management. The other important part is around actions. So as I said, it's something to be able to report or analyze our KPI. It's also important to be able to manage all the actions we're going to implement to improve this KPI. So here, what I do is to select the KPI I want to impact with these actions. It might be at a total action, at a total group or entity level. Okay, and then for instance here, to improve my CO2 equivalent reduction, I'm gonna implement an action around vehicle fleet electrification with its owner, description, qualitative description, quantitative descriptions, I mean the impact we are expecting for this action. So in this case, to electrify my vehicles, I'm expecting to reduce 3,000 tons of CO2. Okay, so the status of the action, starting date, end date, and also important, the budget allocated for this action. So budget allocated, use budgets, remaining budget, and so on, with a summary of how it's going, our budget for each indicator, and aggregated to our goal. Okay. So this is basically the most important things. Then we have other stuff like, let's say, narrative reporting. So here I'm using Capacity or Web Excel to create or to generate some text. Okay, so it's a very easy text sample. And for instance, when I change the year, I have the text that's going to be adapted to the data. Okay, so for instance, previous year, I had this amount of CO2 tons for the previous year, with a decrease of minus 34%. So here I can then change it, actualize it, and it's now an increase for our current year. With this, some example around that. I have also the capacity to generate other reporting. Okay, this is another framework where I have mapped my indicator to be able to report it in another way. Okay, so I don't have to manage it separately. Workflow management, approval workflow, to know which indicator has been approved, rejected, or not checked. Okay, by reporting standard. So from SDG, the National United Nations standard, or for the General Reporting Initiative. What's also interesting to present the way we manage security. Okay, so just to tell you, because an aspect that is quite important for usually when they see this kind of solution. How we can set up access around goals, indicators, entity, and so on. Okay, so that basically what I wanted to show you. So as you see, the model is quite simple. It can be customized as much as we want. And important is just to present that as an accelerator or starting point or example to begin the sustainability journey.